Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. We welcome everyone who joined us online this morning. Thank you very much for being with us to release the vibration of the Srimad Bhagavatam into the atmosphere. All else is going on in this world by the automatic arrangement of the modes of material nature. Prakrite kuriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. And it's all predictable, and it's all been done before. But when we come into the realm of the Spirit, then everything is new and fresh. Nothing's ever been done before. It's all new and original and miraculous. And the codes of Vedic knowledge have been written down by Srila Vyasadeva, and by releasing the sound vibration that is contained within those codes, just as fire comes out of wood, by igniting it, by these meetings, we follow in the footsteps of the great acharyas who have shown the path of self-realization, which is to meet together and discuss the Srimad Bhagavatam. And by that discussion, Krishna personally manifests. He manifests in a very special way. That is, he becomes attracted to the topic himself. He becomes favorable towards the devotees. He actually enters in within the heart of those who are discussing the pastimes of the Lord. So we're gathered here, just as the sages gathered at Naimasaranya, just as the four Kumaras gathered and spoke to Narayan Rishi, as Narada Muni gathered with many sages, as Shukadev gathered many sages together before he spoke to Parikshit Maharaj. And we're following the same process. We're reading from the same books. They're eternal. The codes are the same through eternity. They're co-eternal with the Lord. They simply manifest in this world for the benefit of the living entities who have become temporarily illusioned by the three modes of material nature. And therefore the Vedanta Sutra, in the Vedanta Sutra, Srila Vyasadeva says, Anavriti Shabdat, Anavriti Shabdat. That by hearing these codes, you will become uncovered. This is the process for uncovering one's original nature, attracting the internal potency of the Lord, which is inherent within the vibration itself. And just as entrepreneurs gather together to discuss plans for expanding their business, devotees meet together as spiritual entrepreneurs, and by discussing their plans for spiritual advancement, all spiritual paraphernalia becomes manifest through the kata. So I congratulate all of you for taking whatever journey you took this morning to get ready, to make yourself clean state of mind and body, and to come in and sit down here, and everyone that's gathered all over the world online to hear this morning's recitation of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which Krishna Svada Mo Bhagate Dharma Ganadi Bisaha Kalo Nashta Drishamesha Purar Narko Donoditaha is the incarnation of Krishna in the Kali Yuga age. Krishna is always making arrangement for the living entities because we're tied to him we have an eternal tie of kinship to the Lord, and he cares deeply about every living entity, so he's always making an arrangement. So just after he departed to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc., he manifested as the Srimad Bhagavatam through the lips of Shukadev Goswami. It's the same Bhagavatam that's eternal. It just remanifests at various times through various agents. Shukadev remanifested the Bhagavatam, and in the Bhagavatam itself it is said that this is the incarnation. Krishna Swadamo Bhagate, Dharma Ganadi Bisaha. Those who are devoid of light in this age will get light from this Purana, and they'll derive all religious principles from the Purana. They will derive pure devotion from hearing this Purana in the association of the devotees. Satam prasangam mama virya samvido bhavandi ritkarna rasayana kata tajjoshanarashu apavargavartmini shararatir bhaktir anukramishuti. Which means that just by sitting in the association of devotees and hearing, then one will reverse one's direction in this world. Instead of being impelled towards birth, death, old age, and disease, and the same old samsara, one will then make a pathway back home, back to Godhead. And not only that, step by step, one will progress on the path of faith. Faith will thicken and start as shraddha and then become rati, or actual positive attraction to the Lord, and then bhakti, which means the full-blown relationship with the Lord will be manifest by this process of hearing and the association of devotees. So make no mistake about it, this is the process for self-realization. And those of you who are online, we're very grateful that you're there. Thank you. And please text us at 650-245-7018. That's 650-245-7018. Maybe just send a text right now, say Hari Bol, and then during the course of the conversation, you can text in questions or comments. Shraddha Devi Dasi is sitting in the front row taking your texts, and she will alert me as soon as they come in, and we'll include you in the conversation. Also, those who are online, you'll notice there's a telephone number on the screen so that you can join via conference call. And we have a speaker just above my head. We'll be able to hear you speak in the class. We'd love to hear your voices. Please join us. Thank you very much. Also, there's some seats in the front for those of you who ordered front row seats and didn't get them and are sitting in the bleachers. You can move up. You got 2 Hari Bols. Who are the 2 Hari Bols from?
One is from Pratibha and the other is from Gandharvika Mataji.
Pratibha and Gandharvika ki jai. Thank you for checking in. We're so happy you're there. Okay.
Lavanya.
Who else?
Lavanya Mataji.
Lavanya checked in. Hare Krishna, Lavanya. Very happy you're there.
Langi also.
Shamalangi. Hare Krishna. Okay. Keep those cards and letters coming. Operators will be standing by to take all your calls. Make no mistake about it. Okay, so where we left off last time, right now we're studying the Catur Sloki Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam was spoken from the beautiful lotus mouth of the Lord Sri Krishna to Brahma, who is very dear to Krishna. They have a very close friendship. Brahma is an unusual living entity. It's a post. Brahma is a post, which means that in every creation, in every universe, there's a Brahma. As we just heard, Brahma is born from the lotus stem of the Garbhodakshay Vishnu. And the living entity who gets that post is one who has perfectly followed the dharma regulations in the Shastra for 100 lifetimes without fail. Therefore, we hear in the last verse of the Brahma Samhita, Krishna says, listen, O Vidhi. Vidhi means someone who's very expert at following all these rules and regulations. Following these rules and regulations, I'm not just talking about the 4 regulative principles, but I'm talking about all of the detailed aspects of Vedic culture and the Manu Samhita and so forth. It's a very difficult thing. But Brahma is very, very pious, qualified living entity. And so Lord Krishna speaks to him at the beginning of creation, and he gives him this wisdom. And the Bhagavatam begins as 4 verses. So we're hearing these 4 verses. We started on Wednesday. We heard Aham Sarvasya, Aham Evasameva Gre Nanyad Yat Sarasat Param Pascharaham Yere Tasya Yovishisheta Sosmyaham. That Krishna is saying, Aham, I am the one who is existing before creation. I'm the one who's existing after the annihilation. And I'm there present at all times, even in the interim. And we heard the purports both from the Srimad Bhagavatam and from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, because in both places there's the Catur Sloki, and in both places Prabhupada gives commentary. It's similar with some nuance. So we heard that, and then we heard the next verse, Ratertam ya pratiyeta na pratiyeta chatmani tad vidyanat manomayam yatapaso yatatamaha, in which Krishna said that anything that you see that doesn't have any relationship to me, know that to be my illusory energy, Maya. It's that reflection which appears to be in darkness. So the idea is in this verse that Krishna is everything. He's a non-differentiated entity, as we just heard in the in the Sri Brahma Samhita. He's multidimensional. It means he's connected to every part of the universe simultaneously at one and the same time. And he's within every atom in his fullness, in his completeness. So right now in every atom, if we can imagine, here's a little atom over here. You could look in the atom, there's Krishna in its complete manifestation. In his fullness, he's present there. Not as something amorphous or impersonal or just some energy, but actually complete with all his opulences. And we know from the Shastra how Mother Jashoda, when Krishna was just a baby in Vrindavan, heard news from his friends that Krishna had eaten dirt. And so she called him to task and said, Krishna, you're eating dirt. Why are you eating dirt? And he said, no, it's a false claim. They're making false claims against me. And so just see for yourself. So he opened his mouth, and she looked in his mouth, and she saw herself sitting there looking in his mouth. And then she saw within that that she was also within that. There was an infinite number of Yashodas looking into the mouth of Lord Krishna, and an infinite number of universes. So Krishna is present everywhere at every time, in all places, in all circumstances. So there's a similar story of the Markandeya Rishi who asked to see Krishna's illusory energy. If you ever get a prayer, don't ask for this. I tried it once, and it's very excruciating. Markandeya Rishi, not that my experience with anything like Markandeya Rishi, I just got something like cholera right after I asked. And then Markandeya Rishi asked to see the illusory potency of the Lord, and soon he was trapped in the pralaya, and the destruction of the universe, and he was being tossed in the waves helplessly. And then he came to a little island, and he saw a little baby who was very attractive. It was Krishna, who was floating on a banyan leaf and sucking his toe, because Krishna likes to taste his own sweetness. And when he approached this child, then the child inhaled him, and then he ended up back in his ashram. And so Krishna is an undifferentiated entity. That is, he's unlimitedly dimensional. He's at all places and all times, in all places, all circumstances, but at the same time he remains his eternal identity. He explains that in summary in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and so forth. And therefore everything is Krishna. There's not one thing that's not contained in Krishna or that isn't Krishna, because either everything's Krishna or Krishna's energy, and the energy and the energetic are the same and different at the same time. And so if one sees something as separate from Krishna, that's Maya, that's illusion. It's not that it is separate, it's just because my consciousness is obscured, I'm seeing it as separate from Krishna. Therefore, the second verse of the Catur Sloki, Krishna says, Ritertam yat pratyeta na pratyeta chatmani tad vidyarat manomayam yatapaso yatatamaha. That if you see separately, something separate from me, then you're in Maya, basically. And Prabhupada pointed out in his purport that the attempts at getting knowledge in this world without seeing the connection to Krishna are just like a little reflection of light in the darkness. It's not enough to light the darkness. If you have a flashlight and you walk around Silicon Valley at night, it's not that you're going to light up the valley. And even if you get Google to get on the project and they bring in all the, because they can do anything practically except save us from death. They bring in all the lights and everything like that. They still can't even light up Silicon Valley, what to speak of the whole earth. Only when the sun rises can we see everything clearly. So our attempts, which are separated from service to the Lord and taking descending knowledge, are like reflection in darkness. They actually can't help us see anything or move forward. So we should declare our dependence on Krishna. And we should see everything in relationship to Krishna. Then we're not in Maya. Then we're properly situated. And now, and actually, we heard the two purports for the first verse, Ahamevasa Megvagre. We heard one purport for Ratertam Yat Pratyeta. And now I'm going to read the second purport, which is from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And without much interruption from myself, we're going to hear the words of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So this is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, chapter 1, text number 54. Ratirtam yat pratyeta na pratyeta chatmani tadvidyadatmano bhayam yata bhaso yata tamaha rate without artam value yat that which pratyeta appears to be na not pratyeta appears to be cha certainly atmani in relation to me tat that vidyat you must know atmanaha my mayam illusory energy yata just as abhasaha the reflection yata just as tamaha the darkness. Translation: what appears to be truth without me is certainly my illusory energy, for nothing can exist without me. It is like a reflection of a real light in the shadows, for in the light there are neither shadows nor reflections. Please repeat. What appears to be truth without me is certainly my illusory energy, for nothing can exist without me. It is like a reflection of a real light in the shadows. For in the light there are neither shadows nor reflections. Purport: in the previous verse, the absolute truth and its nature have been explained. One must also understand the relative truth to actually know the absolute. The relative truth, which is called Maya, or material nature, is explained here. Maya has no independent existence. One who is less intelligent is captivated by the wonderful activities of Maya, but he does not understand that behind these activities is the direction of the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.10, it is said, Maya Dakshena Prakritihi Suyate Sa Characharam. The material nature is working and producing moving and non-moving beings only by the supervision of Krishna. The real nature of Maya, the illusory existence of the material manifestation, is clearly explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. The absolute truth is substance, and the relative truth depends upon its relationship with the absolute for its existence. Maya means energy. Therefore, the relative truth is explained to be the energy of the absolute truth. Since it is difficult to understand the distinction between the absolute and relative truths, an analogy can be given for clarification. The absolute truth can be compared to the sun, which is appreciated in terms of two relative truths, reflection and darkness. Darkness is the absence of sunshine, and a reflection is a projection of sunlight into darkness. Neither darkness nor reflection has its independent existence. Darkness comes when the sunshine is blocked. For example, if one stands facing the sun, his back will be in darkness. Since darkness stands in the absence of the sun, it is therefore relative to the sun. The spiritual world is compared to the real sunshine, and the material world is compared to the dark regions where the sun is not visible. When the material manifestation appears very wonderful, this is due to a perverted reflection of the supreme sunshine, the absolute truth, as confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra. Whatever one can see here has its substance in the absolute. As darkness is situated far away from the sun, so the material world is also far away from the spiritual world. The Vedic literature directs us not to be captivated by the dark regions, tamaha, but to try to reach the shining regions of the absolute, yogi-dham. Yogi-dham. The spiritual world is brightly illuminated, but the material world is wrapped in darkness. In the material world, sunshine, moonshine, or different kinds of artificial light are required to dispel darkness, especially at night, for by nature the material world is dark. Therefore the Supreme Lord has arranged for sunshine and moonshine, but in his abode, as described in the Bhagavad Gita 15:6, there is no necessity for lighting by sunshine, moonshine, or electricity, because everything is self-effulgent. That which is relative, temporary, and far away from the absolute truth is called Maya, or ignorance. This illusion is exhibited in two ways, as explained in the Bhagavad Gita. The inferior illusion is inert matter, and the superior illusion is the living entity. The living entities are called illusory in this context only because they are implicated in the illusory structures and activities of the material world. Actually, the living entities are not illusory, for they are parts of the superior energy of the Supreme Lord and do not have to be covered by Maya if they do not want to be so. Again, actually the living entities are not illusory, for they are parts of the superior energy of the Supreme Lord and do not have to be covered by Maya if they do not want to be so. Again, actually the living entities are not illusory, for they are parts of the superior energy of the Supreme Lord and do not have to be covered by Maya if they do not want to be so. That begs a question. Do I want to be covered? The actions of the living entities in the spiritual kingdom are not illusory. They are the actual eternal activities of liberated souls. We're going to sing the Mangalacharana prayers before we go any further, so you can turn in your book to the last yellow tab. It's a Meyer lemon yellow tab. And you'll see at the top says Pranam prayers, and we'll sing them together. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Uta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Dham Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvajutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Shri Navadvipa Para Pradipa Sandipyamana Satato Bhuviya Chetastamo Hanti Hiyasya Yatnad Tam Kirtayama Prabhupada Devam Shri Bhakti Siddhanta Prachodita Shri Vyasadya Kosham Kushalam Kripalu Sanblecha Vagdesha Chayeda Dadyas Tam Kirtayama Prabhupada Devam Achadyate Yat Paratarka Drishya Govinda Murtyujvala Bhaskarena Advaita Kadyota Kulam Jagatyam Tam Kirtayama Prabhupada Devam Yasyaiva Yadnina Purana Raja Gangamala Keshava Keli Hamsa Sat Stotra Ratna Vahitiha Loke Tam Kirtayama Prabhupada Devam Shri Radhika Krishna Padara Vinde Sahasra Hritsu Shatamandareshu Aropayadyo Madhure Prativyam Tam Kirtayama Prabhupada Devam Koshaladhair Yasya Sahasra Shastra Shastrati Varshai Pratiyante Sihi Chanda Kalir Moha Chamur Hatena Tam Kirtayama Prabhupada Devam Nana Lasad Gaura Sudha Prakasha Pula Shitao Stapita Eva Yena Krishnanu Chinta Jana Sangha Vrikshas Tam Kirtayama Prabhupada Devam Yo Nityada Jivati Daivikeshu Nijasu Shiksasu Tusanugami Kripam Budhir Nanda Shuta Shritatma Tam Kirtayama Prabhupada Devam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Tinamine Shri Varshabha Devi Daitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhuryo Jvala Premadya Shri Rupa Nuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupa Nuga Virudhapa Siddhanta Dvanta Harine Namo Gaura Kishoraya Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralamba Rasambode Padam Bhujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodhaya Sakchidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaura Virbhava Bomestvam Nirdeshta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarva Bhoma Shri Jagannataya Te Namaha Vancha Kalpa Turubascha Kripa Sindhu Pyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tvishe Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Suratau Pangor Mama Manda Matergati Matsarvasva Padambojao Radha Madana Mohanao Divya Vrindaranya Kalpadrumadha Srimad Ratna Ghana Sinhasanastao Srimad Radha Shila Govinda Deva Preshtalibi Sevyamano Smarami Srimad Rasa Rasarambi Vamshivata Tatastitaha Karshan Venu Swaner Gopir Gopinatha Shriyestunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vrindayai Tulsi Devyai Priyayai Keshavasya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavatai Namo Namaha Shri Nishinga Jai Nishinga Jai Jai Nishinga Prahlada Desha Jaya Padma Mukha Padma Bringa Matsamo Nasti Papatma Naparadi Chakaschana Parihare Pilajame Kimbruve Purushottama Yuvatinam Yata Yuni Yunam Cha Yuvatau Yata Mano Biramate Tadvan Mano Me Ramatam Twayi Umas Kadita Padanam Bhumir Eva Valambanam Dvai Jata Paradhanam Tvameva Sharanam Prabhu Govinda Balabe Radhe Prartaye Tvamaham Sada Tradiyam iti janatu Govindo mam tvayasaha Radhe Vrindavanadishe Karunamrita Vahani Kripaya Nijapadabja Dasyam Mayam Pradiyatam Vande Nanda Vardastrinam Padarenum Abhikshnashaha Yasam Hadikato Gitam Punati Bhuvanatrayam Namashreshtam Manamapi Shachiputram Matra Sarupam Shirupam Tasya Gajam Aruparim Maturim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaramaho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Adadhana Stridam Tanter Idam Jache Puna Puna Srimad Rupa Padam Bhoja Rajoham Shyam Bhave Bhave Hantaya Madhura Bala Harida Savaryo Yad Rama Krishna Charanashvarasha Pramodaha Manam Tanoti Sahago Gana Yostayo Yad Paniya Suyavasakandana Kandamulai Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Go Premanande, Hari Hari Bo. So Maya has no independent existence, and Maya means energy. So energy means dependent. It's dependent on the energetic. Just as darkness and reflection are dependent on light, because if you don't have light, then you can't have the absence of light, which is darkness. And reflection means that within the darkness, some light is introduced. And so we're hearing in this verse about the source of everything. And this is Sambandha Gyan, because born into ignorance, I have no idea about my origin. In fact, when Brahma was first born, although he's such a pious, qualified living entity, he had no idea of his origin. And he tried to search it out with his senses. He climbed down inside the lotus, which is born from the navel of Garbhodakshai Vishnu, and he searched it out in all different directions with his four heads, and he was unable to ascertain his origin, because Atashi Krishnanamadi na bhaved grayam indriye sevamukhi hi jivado swayameva spuratyada. One cannot ascertain the absolute truth with one's mundane material senses. But he can reveal himself when he's pleased with one's service, which begins with the tongue. So the Lord then gave Brahma a clue how to see him, and he gave him the syllables tapa, to perform this tapasya. And we hear in the Brahma Samhita, Uvacha Puratas Tasmai Tasya Divya Saraswati Kama Krishnai Govinda He Gopi Janityapi Balabhaya Priyava Nirmantram Te Dasati Priyam Tapastom Tapa Etena Tava Siddhir Bhavishyati. That the Divya Saraswati appeared before Brahma and gave him the mantra, which is mentioned in the book, Brahma Samhita, which is a Krishna mantra, which fulfills all desires, whatever desire one has. And she said, do thou practice tapasya by means of chanting this mantra, then all your desires will be fulfilled. Purport? Its purport is clear. So then Brahma began chanting the mantra, and he performed his tapasya, his seva, in that way, and then Krishna revealed the spiritual world to him. So the divisions of energy are very important, and they're mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna talks about his separated material energies. Bhumirapo analo vayu kamano buddharevacha ahankara ityame bina prakritirashita, which is earth, fire, water, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. These 8 comprise my separated material energies. And then in the following verse, Krishna says, besides these, there's a superior energy of mind, which is the living entity, who's embedded within this material energy, and he's actually sustaining it. Without the conscious living entity within matter, matter wouldn't matter, because it needs somebody to be conscious of it and observe it. And the living entity moves matter by his desire. But that desire which is separated from the service of the Lord is just like a reflection in darkness. It has no real consequence. And there are many speculative philosophers who try to find out the absolute truth, and nowadays through scientific means. And one of them, Carl Sagan, some time ago gave a special broadcast about finding the origin of the universe, and in that broadcast he proposed that when you suggest that there's an absolute truth, God, it's an unnecessary step, because you might as well just suggest that there is material nature, because you could just as well say that material nature eternally existed and eternally exists, and everything's being manifest from material nature. And therefore, why not that? Why take one step backwards from material nature and then say, okay, there's another creator who created the material nature, and so forth? This is actually a common argument that people make. Why is there a need for God, a supreme controller and a creator, and so forth? Because we'll just say that the universe, that this energy we see before us, it's already doing a fine job of creating so many things. So that there it is. There's your God, and there is no real definable creator, just the energy itself. But actually, in his talk, Sariputta Prabhu defeats this argument by saying that there's a difference. However, if you claim that material nature is the creator and the origin of everything, you can observe that nature is of an inferior quality, and that it disintegrates over time. It's like if you make a statue with fine detail in it and you leave it sitting long enough, pretty soon all the fingers will wear off and the whole thing will crumble, given enough time. And it won't form into a more complex system. It won't recreate itself. It will simply disintegrate. In fact, I was just talking to Ramananda Sakaprabhu today about the temple, and he said every room needs constant vigilance because it's always going into disarray. Instead of becoming more organized by itself, it has a tendency to become messy. And I said, well, that's very true about I've noticed in my own room, I only live there, but still, every 3 days I have to reorganize the whole thing, I clean it up. And if you just leave a house sitting for some time without attending to it at all, the whole thing will fall apart. It'll just disintegrate. There has to be a living entity there. Anybody here who owns a house or lives in a place that you have to fix yourself, you know that it takes constant fixing in order to stay whole. Otherwise, it just falls apart. And so material nature is like that. It's an inferior energy, as Krishna says. But there's a superior energy, which can be observed that is sustaining the material energy and is superior to it. And God is the source of both of those energies. And He is the creator of all energies. And so in Sambandha Gyan, becoming conscious of this fact is the beginning point of loving God. Aham sarvasya prabhavo matak sarvam pravartate. Krishna says that everything comes from me. And then he says that one who knows this worships me with all his heart. What else are you going to do? I mean, there is nothing else to do after you discover that Krishna is maintaining everything. He's the origin of everything. He's got it all handled, really. And there's nothing to be had except for our loving connection to Him. So we can be observant and see how the energies are working in this world. And we can also become aware of the fact that Krishna is the source of all these energies. And how do we become aware of it? It's mentioned here that the Vedanta Sutra suggests Janmad Yasya Yataha. Krishna is the source of everything. And the Vedanta Sutra also says Atato Brahma Jignasa. If you make the inquiry about the source of everything, then your inquiry will be met with satisfaction. In fact, the word Omkar, Prabhupada's godbrother Sridhar Maharaj used to say, Omkar means the big yes. It means, yes, everything's possible. Yes, you can be fully optimistic that you can get everything, because Omkar contains everything. He's the source of everything. He's the fulfiller of everyone's desire. Saparya gach chukram akayam avranam asnaviram shudham apapavidham kavir manishi paribhu swayambhur yatat yatator tan varadach chastvatibhya samabhyaha. The Lord is perfectly spiritual. He has His form, and He's the most intelligent, and He's been fulfilling everyone's desire since the time immemorial. So you really don't have to worry about anything except for engaging in His service. And then Prabhupada says finally that that which is relative, temporary, and far away from the absolute truth is called Maya, or ignorance. And so the process of devotional service means to remain constantly in contact with Krishna. And I was thinking this morning that there are many difficulties that come with this life, and everyone has them. Please raise your hand if you don't have any difficulties or complexities in your life, because I'm going to move in with you. And you'll notice that these come and go, just like the passing of the weather. You'll notice that at certain times of your life, you think that you have a great problem. Like when you were a teenager, did you ever have a problem that seemed like it was insurmountable, it was the end of the world? Yes or yes? And now looking back on it, it doesn't look like such a big deal. So from a higher perspective, none of our complexities in life are actually a big deal. I make them so because I'm absorbed in the relative energy, that which is disconnected from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when I see myself and all the incidents in my life in relationship with the Supreme Lord, then I understand that there's a plan, that there's a controller. And there's a way to deal with these things. And the way I was remembering this morning is that when you remember Lord Chaitanya, then difficult things become easy. And when you forget Lord Chaitanya, then easy things become difficult. Now that sounds rather simplistic, doesn't it? Well, Occam's razor, the truth of things are, you take the most simplistic answer, the simplest, not simplistic, but simplest. of answers, and that is that by reconnecting with Lord Chaitanya, with the Supreme Absolute Truth, and everything that seems difficult, all the complexities become easy. It's only because I forget Lord Chaitanya that the world seems complex and difficult. And in the midst of the greatest difficulties, if I remember the Lord's arrangement for me and His hand in everything, then it becomes apparent what's going on. Tate anukampam susimikshamano bunjana evatma kritam vipakam. A devotee realizes that he's dependent on the Lord's mercy and he's simply waiting for it. He's arranging his life in such a way that he can catch as much of that mercy as possible. And meanwhile, he's thinking that whatever comes to me as a difficulty, as a problem, as an obstacle is the Lord's mercy. Because these things I've created for myself due to my past ignorance. And acting in ignorance means you're going to make complexities. If you don't know the laws in the country you're going to and you drive on the wrong side of the road, you're going to cause problems for yourself. So coming into this world in ignorance, driving on the wrong side of the road, I create many problems, and the reactions are still coming to me. So the solution to all problems is given here to reconnect our consciousness with Krishna and to see everything in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then, one who sees everything in relation to the Supreme Lord and sees the Supreme Lord within everything never hates anything or any being, right? And one who always sees all living entities as spiritual sparks in quality one with the Lord becomes a true knower of things. What then can be illusion or anxiety for him? So now we can take comments from this first purport, and then we'll move on to the next one. Comments means let's hear what you heard so far. There must have been one particular thing that you heard, however small it was, even one word or one sentence or one concept that stuck in your mind that you can take away with you. What is it? Yes.
Then why make distinction?
So now, because we're broadcasting, when you utter anything, make it into the microphone.
So then why we make distinction between this is the way you do things and this is not how you do things?
Why do you make distinction?
Yes.
Why do you ask that question? Based on...
In basis of if we see everything... if we see everything in relationship with Krishna, so someone might be like doing something like worshipping the demigods or anything like that, but we as devotees understand that we understand that we don't supposed to be worshipping demigods. So at one side we're making a distinction, right? That okay, demigods are also servants of Krishna, and but I don't want to...
Well, let's take that particular example. First of all, we're not against worshipping demigods.
Yeah.
And here's when we're not against worshipping demigods. When we understand their connection to Krishna. And Prabhupada says this himself when he was asked specifically about worshipping demigods, that there's no harm in it. Nanda Maharaj worshipped demigods. So did the gopis, and they're the best devotees. The reason one would admonish somebody for worshipping demigods is if they see them as separate from Krishna. Again, the separation is there. Yastu Narayanam Devam Brahma Rudradi Daivatai Samatvenaina Viksheta Sapashendi Bhaved Dhruvam. It is a fixed principle that if someone sees Brahma, Shiva, and the other demigods as different, as separate from the Supreme Lord, then they're Pashandis. They're atheists, actually. This is Maya, because it's separated in vision for the Lord. But one who sees them in relationship to the Supreme Lord, they see Shiva. Shiva is Shiram Yatara Vikara Vishesha Yogat Sanjayate Nihitata Pratagasti Heto Yashambutam Apitata Samukaiti Karyat Govindamari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. He's transformed, Krishna transformed. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but transformed just a little bit. And he's very dear to the Lord. And so we see his connection. So therefore, Sanatana Goswami worshipped Lord Shiva. If you go to his Bhajan Kutir, you'll find that he has Shiva Lingam right there. So we're not against worshiping demigods as long as we see their complete relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, the question really was, why do we make any arrangements at all if we see everything's being arranged by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, something like that? Yes. Well, to those in the highest level of realization, an Uttama Adhikari. I mean, there are many definitions of Uttama Adhikari, but one of them is that a person who is beyond duality, such a person, as mentioned in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in the section of Ramachandra Puri, Prabhupada says that he quotes Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami quotes a verse that says that a devotee should neither praise or blame anyone in this world, because the devotee sees that everything's going on in a uniform way. It's all working as it should work. Everyone's getting exactly what they deserve. And an Uttama Adhikari sees everyone already engaged in Krishna's service, because he makes no distinction between the internal and external energy, in a sense. He sees, oh, they're in Maya. Well, that's an energy of the Lord. They're engaging in service and so forth. This is a kind of vision of the devotee who is situated on the highest platform. However, at the same time, even those Uttama Adhikaris come down to the second class platform, which means the Madhyama Adhikari, and make distinctions based on the fact that the Lord is not a dead stone, nor are the living entities. And that means the living entities have free will, therefore they can make good choices and bad choices. It's not just because they're dictated by the material energy, and the energy comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they're in Maya, that's okay. It's not, because actually they have an eternal dharma, which is to be engaged in the service of the Lord, and that's been obscured somehow or other by them, the Tatastha living entity becoming involved with the material energy. And the Shristi Leela, the play of the Lord to create the material world over and over again in cycles, has a purpose. And the devotees understand that purpose, and that is that the Lord wants to bring those living entities back into his internal potency for his enjoyment. He's created the living entities for enjoyment, and he wants them to come enjoy with him. And because he's the supreme enjoyer, he's always increasing his enjoyment. The living entities that are stuck in Maya, he has a lamentation for that. That's mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, when it is said that Haridas Thakur was such an advanced devotee that he was experiencing pain on behalf of the Lord Chaitanya, who suffers because of the suffering living entities. He's Paratukaduki. And the Lord's like that. He doesn't want to see the living entities suffer. So the devotees understand that although everything's going on perfectly, everyone's getting what they deserve and so forth, there is a way in which the living entity is in a natural situation, being engaged in Maya, and that the Lord has a desire to bring them back to Godhead. And therefore, the devotees engage in intervention. That's what Sankirtan is, little interventions everywhere. They go and intervene in the life of the jiva who's going merrily along to hell in the material nature, and he goes in and says, hold on, woo, hi, how you doing? Here, take this, eat that, drink that, say this, do that, move over here, come over there. They're trying to move him in the right direction so he gets realigned with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his real purpose in life. The Lord doesn't do that. Samoham savabhuteshu name dveshosti napriya. He says in the 9th chapter of the Gita that I'm equal to everyone. He gives the independence to the living entities. But of course, he does give information because he wants them to come back. He gives this shastra, he comes himself and performs his pastimes just to attract the living entities. But he doesn't force them, because then it would take away their capacity to love. Love means they have to make an independent choice and say, I'm choosing that. I'm going to choose Krishna, service, rather than Maya. But the devotees, they know the purpose of the Lord, and therefore they'll intervene in the lives of the living entities who are engaged in Maya. And we also intervene in our own lives by using our higher intelligence. We develop our higher intelligence, but we'll notice there's a lot of momentum in the lower self. The mind and senses have their own volition, so to speak, because of previous impressions. And we have to, every day, intervene in our own lives and say, you're not going that direction. And mind says, why not? There's a half a gallon ice cream there. I'm going to eat it. And you say, no, we're going to chant Hare Krishna instead, and so forth. So there's distinction between the two different energies. One's inferior and the other is superior. And the Mayavadis don't make that distinction. They just say it's all the same. But there are different qualities of energy. And the spiritual quality, the spiritual energy in the spiritual world are much, much better. Not just a little bit better. They're unimaginably superior to the quality of the material energy. So it's a good idea to make that distinction and to help others make the distinction as well. Is that all right?
It's a long answer, right? I've got to process it.
Okay. Yes, Shraddha.
Just have a few updates from the text messages.
Yes.
One is that Rajesh Virani Prabhu from Saudi Arabia is watching with
Jai.
His family is with him. And Bhumi Mataji and her friend Kelly Mataji is also there.
Jai.
And Bhumi Mataji actually announced this class on the Facebook. And because of that, we have Shubhadra Devi Dasi from San Diego who's watching us as well.
Nice.
And Sankarshan Das Prabhu from Washington, D.C.
Oh, Sankarshan, how nice.
As well. And then Pratibha sent a realization. May
Okay,
I
go ahead.
Okay. Hare Krishna Maharaj, I really like that everything not related to Krishna is his illusionary energy. Yesterday, while reading Srimad Bhagavatam, this impacted me when sages of Naimisharanya said the same thing, that if this question of ours is in any way related to topics of Krishna, then please elaborate. Srimad Bhagavatam 1:16:5. So, the gist of this for me today is to always look for topics of Krishna.
Nice. And Narada Muni says to Vyasadeva in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavatam, 1st canto, that anything that you desire to describe which is separate in vision from the Lord simply disturbs the mind with different results. Just like a boat on water that has no resting place gets blown around by the wind. So all topics that are separate from Krishna Katha, either related to Krishna's service and the pastimes of Krishna, those other kinds of topics disturb the mind. Others, yes.
I was just thinking that, how long do books stay on the bestseller list, And look at our scriptures, they are so old and they are still so popular. People are
still on the bestsellers list? We could put that on the cover. On the bestseller list for 5,000 years.
And I was actually, when you asked for text messages, I was expecting a text message to come from Gandharvika Mataji, but she herself came.
But she
here.
came personally. Nice. Okay, Gandharvika? Not yet. Okay. Yes, Prabhu. Vittal, Prabhu.
Prabhu, could you please elaborate on that counter argument by Sadaputa Prabhu once again, please? Where, he was refuting Carl Sagan's argument, right? Where Carl Sagan says that, okay, if there's no need of going to the extra step of God because the nature could have existed by itself permanently, right? And Sadaputa Prabhu says that this is because material nature is always deteriorating, right? So I was not able to understand how this is. How this is an explanation for nature not having created itself.
Nature doesn't create because it's mutable and it's also destructible. And it's constantly falling apart. It's falling into less complex systems rather than becoming more complex. We don't see that less complex organisms or create more complex organisms. There's nowhere That's done by a superior energy. So by observing how the energy of material nature is acting, we can see that it's not capable of doing what we want it to do. We want to say the theory is that the material nature is doing it all. In and of itself, it's not possible. And when physicists begin to analyze the world, they see that there's material nature, and they try to define it through mathematical equations, but they can't do that for consciousness. Therefore, they either try to say that consciousness doesn't exist, or that there are many arguments about it. It's to say it's a product of material nature and so forth. But they can't prove that mathematically, because it doesn't follow the same rules as the material nature that they're observing. It's categorically different. So there is a different energy. So in and of itself, the material nature is not sufficiently equipped to bring things into creation and sustain them. There's a higher power. So we're saying it can't be material nature. It has to be something that is like what we're describing, Govinda, who's all intelligent and has life and consciousness, and is creating other forms that are complex. Yes.
So, in relation to what Prabhu just asked the question, distinction, and I have a friend from India, and he's a very kind of austere person. He follows all the rituals and everything. And he was talking about some Vedic hymns and all. So I was impressed by his knowledge and all things. So I started talking to him about the Krishna consciousness, and I thought that he might be interested in that. So in that, the discussion led to his argument that we talked about everything, like the extra energy of Lord and the material world and Maya and all. So his notion was that why to consider someone as supreme or Krishna as supreme? Okay, let's follow. I started talking to him, go to the literature, Vedic books, and the traditional knowledge, and we've been passing for years and years. So his whole notion was that why. He questioned the existence of the books and why to go for the scriptures to ask for something. So the kind of why analysis led to his argument that everything is in the root cause is something. Yes, he believes there is some supreme cause, but why to believe that there is Krishna or some God behind all those whys? And he believes that there is something, but he don't know what's that.
Well, he doesn't know what it is, but he doesn't want to accept some other definite conception of it. So you either come forward and tell what it is, otherwise accept ours. Really, I mean, you say, I believe there is something, but I don't know what it is. So we do know what it is. Here's what it is. So, you can't ultimately prove anything. There is nothing provable. You can't prove that you exist either. You know you exist, but you can't prove it. You can only, every argument ultimately is based on some when you follow it back. So the conception of God given in the Shastra is based on apurusheya. It's knowledge which comes from a source that is not human. It's not diminished by the human defects. And that knowledge is eternal. It's self-effulgent, just like the sun is self-effulgent. You don't have to prove the sun when it comes up. It's proof of itself. So similarly, the Vedas are proof of themselves. You can go into detail and study the Vedas and see what their nature is, but you'll find ultimately that they are accurate and pure knowledge. So God, as a person, can reveal himself to others, and one of the ways that he does is through the Vedic wisdom. So that's our statement. Now, you can question it. You're welcome to question that. But unless you have a better idea, then take ours. And it's not that you have to take it on faith either, because it's testable. It's giving a very specific prescription for you to follow. And if you follow the prescription, it's saying that you'll get a consistent result. So in that way, it's also scientific. You can practice it yourself. But it would be ludicrous that because to not take it, based on the fact that it comes from authorized authorities and it's supported by authorized authorities. Just like when you go to the doctor, you have no idea really where this guy came from. Did he really go to Harvard? And what's his qualification? And when he gives you medicine, you also have no idea what's in it. You're not going to go and test it all, are you? I mean, every time you go to the doctor and they give you something, you say, what's in it? And they say sodium benzoate chloride with, whatever it is. And it's like, what's that? And you're not going to go through and do all the tests in the laboratory and try to recreate the whole thing. But ultimately, you're going to have to accept some authority. Otherwise, you get into what's called infinite regress. Infinite regress means that there's always another assumption that you're going to have to prove. Prove that water boils at 200 degrees. I prove it to you with a thermometer. You say, prove that's a real thermometer. I prove it's a thermometer. You say, prove it's a real thermometer testing kit. And then back it goes. And Socrates said there's a point at which the army has to turn around and fight and not simply retreat when it comes to logic. But you'll see that the overwhelming perfect structure or organized structure of the Vedic literature and the support it has from the great acharyas or teachers. And if you can take from that point, okay, here's conception, I'll accept it. Suspend disbelief, as Prabhupada says in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, you don't know if Krishna is God or not. Fine. But at least now you're going to read this book, this version of it, suspend your disbelief and say, okay, just for now, just accept. You don't know who he is, so accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of God. Now read the book. Now see what happens to you. And it's not that you're simply left to speculate with your intellect, but Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I'm there within the heart. I'll guide you. I'll illuminate the path for you. And then it becomes more and more clear. But so many times people would argue with Prabhupada about, why God can be anything. And God said, no, he's Govinda. So you take Govinda or you bring something better. And what's somebody going to say? What's another conception that they have? Besides just, I don't know. Now let's hear the next verse. This verse from the Bhagavatam is text number 35, 2935. Yata mahanti bhutani bhuteshu chavacheshvanu pravishtanya pravishtani tatateshu nateshvaham yata, just as Mahanti, the universal. Bhutani, elements. Bhuteshu, ucha avacheshu, in the minute and gigantic. Anu, after. Pravishtani, entered. Apravishtani, not entered. Tata, so, teshu, in them, na, not, teshu, in them, aham, myself. Translation. O Brahma, please know that the universal elements enter into the cosmos and at the same time do not enter into the cosmos. Similarly, I myself also exist within everything created, and at the same time I am outside of everything. Please repeat. O Brahma. Please know that the universal elements enter into the cosmos and at the same time do not enter into the cosmos. Similarly, I myself also exist within everything created, And at the same time, I am outside of everything. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki. The great elements of material creation, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether, all enter into the body of all manifested entities. The seas, mountains, aquatics, plants, reptiles, birds, beasts, human beings, demigods, and everyone else, and everyone materially manifested, and at the same time such elements are differently situated. In the developed stage of consciousness, the human being can study both physiological and physical science. But the basic principles of such sciences are nothing but the material elements and nothing more. The body of the human being and the body of the mountain, as also the bodies of the demigods, including Brahma, are all of the same ingredient, earth, water, etc. And at the same time, the elements are beyond the body. The elements were created first, and therefore they entered into the bodily construction later. But in both circumstances, they entered the cosmos and also did not enter. Similarly, the Supreme Lord, by His different energies, namely the internal and external, is within everything in the manifested cosmos, and at the same time He is outside of everything, situated in the kingdom of God, Vaikuntha Loka, as described before. This is very nicely stated in the Brahma Samhita 537 as follows. Ananda chinmaya rasa pratibhavitabis tabhirya eva nijarupa taya kalabi goloka eva nivasatya kilatma bhuto govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship the personality of Godhead Govinda, who, by expansion of His internal potency of transcendental existence, knowledge and bliss, enjoys His own and expanded forms. Simultaneously, He enters into every atom of the creation. This expansion of His plenary parts is also more definitely explained in the same Brahma Samhita 535 as follows. Ekopya saura chaditum jagadanda kotim yat shakti rasti jagadanda chayaya dantaha antantarasta paramanu chayantarastam Govindamari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship the personality of Godhead Govinda, who by one of His plenary portions enters into the existence of every universe and every particle of the atoms, and thus ultimately manifests His infinite energy all over the material creation. The impersonalist can imagine or even perceive that the Supreme Brahman is thus all-pervading, and therefore they conclude that there is no possibility of His personal form. Herein lies the mystery of His transcendental knowledge. This mystery is transcendental love of Godhead, and one who is surcharged with such transcendental love of Godhead can without difficulty see the personality of Godhead in every atom and every movable and immovable object. And at the same time, he can see the personality of Godhead in his own abode, Goloka, enjoying eternal pastimes with his eternal associates, who are also expansions of his transcendental existence. This vision is the real mystery of spiritual knowledge, as stated by the Lord in the beginning. Sarashasyam tad angam cha. Interestingly, when Prabhupada produced the books, like in the first canto, on the cover, you'll see the spiritual worlds, the Vaikuntha planets and so forth expanded, and you can see how the Lord is individually present there. In each one of them, you can see the Brahman effulgence and so forth. And what would normally take a great endeavor or millions of years through progression in spiritual practice to come to, Prabhupada revealed in one instant. And he put in the book, and here's the picture. He said, here it is. So if someone's a little bit innocent, can I have a Bhagavad Gita? 13th chapter, I think it's number 24. Those who are have the tendency to listen to others. So those who are a little bit innocent and open, and they simply see this vision of the spiritual world, they can understand right away. They just accept it. And then they have perfect knowledge. The thing about dogma, everyone follows some dogmas because we can't possibly go back and test everything for ourselves. But if you accept the right dogmas, then you're okay. And so in this verse from the 13th chapter, 24th verse, Krishna says, Ya evam veti purusham. Is that it? No, that's not it. My fault. 26. Anye tvevam ajanataha shrutvanebhya upasate tepi chattitarantyeva mrityum shruti parayanaha. Again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about Him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. So if someone is innocent enough to simply accept, oh, here's the Supreme Personality of God, it's coming through a reliable source, then they can transcend birth and death immediately. And that was Prabhupada's genius in distributing the transcendental literatures and illustrating them. Such a way people open it up and it says in the caption, here's Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And an innocent person looks at it and said, wow, there's God. Instantly he's liberated. Instantly he comes to the perfection of life just by accepting. And so it's actually a simple process to accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a natural. But we become waylaid by many confusing kinds of theories and so forth. And the Mayavadis have word jugglery, which will boggle the mind and make you thinking, do I exist? Don't I exist? I mean, and the scientists, have all their various theories, which actually are based on faith. Ultimately, they're faith-based, just like they say everything. They criticize others for being faith-based, but their ideas of a big bang and everything coming from a point and expanding from that, and something like that. When you take it back far enough, they'll just say, well, that's the realm of the inconceivable. This vision is the real mystery of spiritual knowledge, as stated by the Lord in the beginning, Sarahasyam tad angam cha. Which verse is that, Srivas? Sarahasyam tad angam cha. Where's that from? This mystery is the most confidential part of the knowledge of the Supreme, and it is impossible for the mental speculators to discover by dint of intellectual gymnastics. The mystery can be revealed through the process recommended by Brahmaji. And there, the word intellectual gymnastics is one of Prabhupada's phrases he coined. Think about it, intellectual gymnastics. And in the Brahma Samhita we hear from Brahma, who in his, not Brahma Samhita, but in his prayers to Lord Krishna, can someone move these chairs so the devotees, the energy is not blocked between them, please? That atapite deva padambuja paya prashada leshana grihita evahi janati tadvam bhagavan mahimno nachanya eko picharam bachimban. After Brahma, who's the biggest intellect in the universe, there's nobody more intellectual than him. He can do more intellectual gymnastics than anyone. After he tried to trick Krishna and steal away his calves and boys and then see what would happen, he wanted to test him a little bit. And Krishna remanifested them perfectly, exactly as they were before. And we know the story. Afterwards, Brahma was so enamored of Krishna's powers that he made these humble prayers to the Lord, which you'll find in the 14th chapter of the 10th canto.
It's from the 31st verse of the same chapter.
31st verse. Okay, we'll take a look at that in a sec. Thanks, Srivas Prabhu. And then he says, Atapite deva padambuja dvaya prashada leshana grihita evati. That you can understand the absolute truth if you have a lesha, just a whiff of fragrance of the mercy of the Lord's lotus feet. Then you can understand him. But without that, you can perform all kinds of mental gymnastics, intellectual gymnastics, but you won't understand anything. And we read in the Brahma Samhita today, Pantastu koti shatavatsara sambragamyo Vayoradhapi manaso munipungavana. Munipungavana means the best of munis, like the topmost thinkers. And they can around and around and around and around, but Brahma is saying, you're not going to even come close to the tips of the lotus feet of the Lord. You can't approach in that way through mental speculation. You have to accept a higher authority. And I'm nothing. I'm going to continue. This mystery is the most confidential part of the knowledge of the Supreme, and it is impossible for the mental speculators to discover by dint of intellectual gymnastics. The mystery can be revealed through the process recommended by Brahmaji in his Brahma Samhita 538 as follows. Primanjana churita bhakti vilochanena santaksa daiva hridayesha vilokayanti yam shama sundaram achintya gunaswarupam govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship the original personality of Godhead, Govinda, whom the pure devotees, their eyes smeared with the ointment of love of Godhead, always observe within their hearts. This Govinda, the original personality of God, is Shamasundar with all transcendental qualities. We should have a little company that sells that ointment. Actually, we do. Therefore, although he is present in every atom, the Supreme Personality of Godhead may not be visible to the dry speculators. Still, the mystery is unfolded before the eyes of the pure devotees because their eyes are anointed with love of Godhead. And this love of Godhead can be attained only by the practice of transcendental loving service of the Lord, and nothing else. The vision of the devotees is not ordinary. It is purified by the process of devotional service. In other words, as the universal elements are both within and without, similarly the Lord's name, form, quality, pastimes, entourage, etc., as they are described in the revealed scripture, or as performed in the Vaikuntha Lokas, far, far beyond the material cosmic manifestation, are factually being televised in the heart of the devotee. The man with a poor fund of knowledge cannot understand, although by material science one can see things far away by means of television. Factually, the spiritually developed person is able to have the television of the kingdom of God always reflected within his heart. That is the mystery of knowledge of the personality of Godhead. The Lord can award anyone and everyone liberation, mukti, from the bondage of material existence, yet he rarely awards the privilege of love of Godhead, as confirmed by Narada. Muktim dadati karichit smana bhakti yogam. This transcendental devotional service of the Lord is so wonderful that the occupation keeps the deserving devotee always wrapped in psychological activities without deviation from the absolute touch. Come on, that's poetry. Thus, love of Godhead, developed in the heart of the devotee, is a great mystery. Brahmaji previously told Narada that the desires of Brahmaji are never unfulfilled because he is always absorbed in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Nor has he any desire in his heart save and except the transcendental service of the Lord. That is the beauty and mystery of the process of bhakti yoga. As the Lord's desire is infallible because he is achyuta, similarly the desires of the devotees in the transcendental service of the Lord are also achyuta, infallible. This is very difficult, however, for the layman to understand without knowledge of the mystery of devotional service, as it is very difficult to know the potency of touchstone. As touchstone is rarely found, a pure devotee of the Lord is also rarely to be seen, even amongst millions of liberated souls. Kotishwapi Mahamune. Out of all kinds of perfections attained by the process of knowledge, yoga perfection in devotional service is the highest of all and the most mysterious also, even more mysterious than the 8 kinds of mystic perfection attained by the process of yogic performances. In the Bhagavad Gita 1864, the Lord therefore advised Arjuna about this bhakti yoga. Sarvagoyatamam bhuya shinume paramam vachaha. Just hear from me again about the most confidential part of the instructions in Bhagavad Gita. The same was confirmed by Brahmaji to Narada in the following words. Idam Bhagavatam nama yanme bhagavatoditam sangraho yam vidutinam tvam etad vipuli kuru. Brahmaji said to Narada, whatever I have spoken to you about the Bhagavatam was explained to me about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and I am advising you to expand these topics nicely so that people may easily understand the mysteries of Bhakti Yoga by transcendental loving service to the Lord. It is to be noted here that the mystery of Bhakti Yoga was disclosed to Brahmaji by the Lord himself. Brahmaji explained the same mystery to Narada. Narada explained it to Vyasa. Vyasa explained it to Shukadeva Goswami. And the same knowledge is coming down in the unalloyed chain of disciplic succession. If one is fortunate enough to have received the knowledge in the transcendental disciplic succession, surely he will have the chance to understand the mystery of the Lord and that of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the sound incarnation of the Lord. From the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Yata Mahati Bhutani, text 55, Bhuteshu Chavacheswanu, Pravishtanya Pravishtani Tatateshu Nateshwaham. As the material elements enter the bodies of all living beings and yet remain outside them all, I exist within all material creations and yet am not within them. Purport. The gross material elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, combine with the subtle material elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego, to construct the bodies of this material world. And yet they are beyond these bodies as well. Any material construction is nothing but an amalgamation or combination of material elements in varied proportions. These elements exist both within and beyond the body. For example, although the sky exists in space, it also enters within the body. Similarly, the Supreme Lord, who is the cause of the material energy, lives within the material world as well as beyond it. Without his presence within the material world, the cosmic body could not develop. Just as without the presence of the spirit within the physical body, the body could not develop. The entire material manifestation develops and exists because the Supreme Personality of Godhead enters it as Paramatma, or the Supersoul. The Personality of Godhead, in his all-pervading feature of Paramatma, enters every entity, from the biggest to the most minute. His existence can be realized by one who has the single qualification of submissiveness, and who thereby becomes a surrendered soul. The development of submissiveness is the cause of proportionate spiritual realization by which one can ultimately meet the Supreme Lord in person as a man meets another man face to face. Because of his development of transcendental attachment for the Supreme Lord, a surrendered soul feels the presence of his beloved everywhere. And all his senses are engaged in the loving service of the Lord. His eyes are engaged in seeing the beautiful couple, Sri Radha and Krishna, sitting on a decorated throne beneath a desire tree in the transcendental land of Vrindavan. Everyone can turn their attention to Sri Radha Madan Mohanji Ki Jai. His nose is engaged in smelling the spiritual aroma of the lotus feet of the Lord. Everyone please. Similarly, his ears are engaged in hearing the messages from Vaikuntha, Hare Krishna, and his hands embrace the lotus feet of the Lord and his associates. Thus the Lord is manifested to a pure devotee from within and without. This is one of the mysteries of the devotional service in a devotional relationship in which a devotee and the Lord are bound by a tie of spontaneous love. To achieve this love should be the goal of life for every living being. We try, but we can never come to the end of this. And time just runs out. It's the greatest problem we have. There's so many things running around, just getting everything in order so that we can come and sit and hear. It's nice to take longer periods of time to hear. We would like to have maybe a 3-day weekend or something like that, where we could do at least 5 hours or 6 hours of hearing Prabhupada's books. What do you think? Yeah. So we could put that on the schedule, and we'll plan for that. 6 hours of reading, 6 hours of kirtan. Yeah, you're into it. Okay, so now we have 9 little minutes left, which could be a big deal if we were going to, it's the law of forced efficiency. If you know you're leaving the planet in 9 minutes, Maharaj Katvanga, he did it in a moment. So let's take advantage of these last. What do we have? Do we have any texts that have come in? Okay, so now we'll take reflections, not the kind that appear in darkness.
It's just
Yes. Okay, go ahead.
I had a question in the last verse.
Okay.
There we read in the purport that the spiritual world is self-effulgent and there is no need of these artificial things. But in the spiritual world also there is night and all that, right? Do we understand that the night happens just to facilitate Krishna's pastimes?
Yes. This is mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that all of the various changes of seasons, and there are many, in fact, all the seasons can appear at once. In Vrindavan, Krishna will manifest all the various seasons all at one time for the pleasure to enhance the pastimes of his devotees, and similarly the rising of the moon and so forth. The moon has a very... In poetry, the moon, not that many people talk about the sun, but a lot of people talk about the moon. Oh, the moon, when the moon rises, and so forth, when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie. I mean, everyone, moon, moon, moon. So the moon is a representation of this very, romantic, longing feeling. And you'll find in the poetry of Rupa Goswami and all the great devotees, the Kama Gayatri mantra is mentioning the 24 and a half moons of Krishna's body and so forth. When the gopis thought, when the moon would rise, that they would die. This is a form of ecstasy that they're experiencing. Death is one of the very extremely advanced manifestations of love for Krishna, that you die. So they were afraid when the moon would rise that, they would see Krishna in the moon and they would just die because they're feeling so much separation and so forth. So yes, everything we see in this material world is actually a reflection of what's in the spiritual world. But everything that's in the spiritual world is centered around Krishna. And centered around Krishna means it's all for the enjoyment of his Leela and so forth. So it all has a relationship in very esoteric and unimaginably wonderful ways to his pastimes.
So do we understand that there is no need for these things? Like in the material world, we need sun, we need moon for us to see. But in spiritual world, they don't need it, but these things are there just for...
Yeah, in the material world, we have this relationship between the Adhyatmic, Adhibhautic, and Adhidaivic entities. So the Adhyatmic, it is the living entity, but he's dependent on the Adhidaivic. So, for instance, we have the eye, but we can't see without the sun. So the sun has no purpose except for the fact we have an eye. So there's this interdependent relationship that the entities have in this material world. But in the spiritual world, everything's being directly manifested and maintained by Krishna. And everything's fully conscious and therefore full of light. There's no darkness. There's no shadow. The material world is the shadow reflection. Shrishti, Stiti, Pralayasarana, Shaktireka, Chayeva Yasya. It's the moving shadow that we see here of the actual substance. You're welcome.
Prabhuji, I was just thinking how we are so fortunate because for one of the classes we happened to read the philosophy text by Michael Vasquez. It's a 700-page book, and all the concepts that what they say is about the creation and everything is explained so nicely, but there is no mention of a person, as Prabhuji was saying. And after reading through few texts, Priya Kishore sat back and said that everything is presented so systematically that if you really read it with the submissiveness that Prabhupada is saying, my faith is so fragile, so I may leave out. So I was just thinking how our Bhagavatam is presenting the whole thing, especially Prabhupada's purport, is more scientific, and if we just develop this submissiveness, then we can get all true knowledge which is not mentioned everywhere else. So I just wanted to thank Srivas Prabhu, how now I see that in the beginning of the class you were saying how when we start reading Bhagavatam and discussing on it, it starts changing the direction in our life. So now he has just asked us to put attendance for how many minutes we read Bhagavatam every day. So I feel so very fortunate that this opportunity is not available anywhere else, and we are in America, in Silicon Valley, but still there are devotees who are forcing us to read Bhagavatam. This is no joke, and I really pray that I make use of every moment of that association. And
nice
thank
appreciation.
you.
And it also brings to mind the fact that there are so many living entities that are not aware of the vibration. And it's not like you can just walk in and start making the vibration and they'll stay. For instance, the devotees at Google were telling me that after 10 classes, people began to funnel out because the more specific the topics would become about the Supreme Controller and God and so forth, and it's like, oh, I get it. I'm out of here. But then what was left, when I went to give the talk was the group that had stayed was relatively smaller. And when Prabhupada came to America, not only did he have to bring the Bhagavatam, but he also had to create the market for it. Because there weren't people that could just sit down and relish Bhagavatam. They had to start from the beginning, and he had to introduce them these topics. That was a great austerity for him, because the one thing that a pure devotee wants to do is just sit down and hear all day long. And Prabhupada had to introduce these very elemental topics to people, then bring them along, asking all kinds of crazy drug-induced questions and things like that, just to create the market. Yes, from the text. 2 from the text.
So first is, we have Hridaynath Mane Prabhu. He's also coming through Bhumi Mataji's post on Facebook. And he has a question that why is Krishna and his body parts in Brahma Samhita compared to material things, like his eyes are compared to lotus, etc.?
Well, ultimately, the material things that we see in this world originate in the spiritual world. And they're the reflection in the spiritual world. They're reflections of what's actually in the spiritual world. So when we compare through poetical language, through use of analogy, to things in this world, it's to give us a comparison so that we can see what is the feeling when you see a lotus, for instance, in this world. I've seen lotuses. I studied them minutely when I was in Japan, because in Osaka I go to the botanical gardens. Vanchatita Prabhu always takes me there for a long walk, and they're great gardeners in Japan. They have a large section for various species of lotus flowers. One part of the year I went there and there were no lotuses, just one little one. And then when I was there in June last year, that's when they all bloom. It's very moishiatsui. It's moist and hot at the same time. And so the lotuses are blooming, and I couldn't take my eyes off them. They were mesmerizing because the perfection of the lotus, the beauty of the lotus, and it grows out of the mud at the bottom. They have these cement pools they build, and then at the bottom there's mud, and it grows out all the way up to the top, and then it just emerges in all its glory. And all I could do was sit there and look at it. And there was a visceral feeling, a visceral reaction to it. So the things of this world that are beautiful practically are inexplicable. What is beauty? What is the aesthetic feeling? What are the emotions that are invoked by the aesthetics of this world? This is a great topic, and actually people study that. What is beauty? Is there such a thing as inherent beauty and so forth? And Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says that whatever you see that's inherently beautiful in this world is coming from my opulence and so forth. So when we know the relationship to Krishna and we see it in that way, the comparing to the things of this world evokes our natural feeling of devotion and love. And even someone who doesn't know what God is, doesn't know what Govinda is, when they see something wonderful in material nature, it still evokes in them a feeling of respect, grandeur. They see the grandeur of material nature, a huge mountain or something like that, and they feel, wow, God, something. They'll even in, as Prabhupada points out, Aboriginal tribes, they'll worship fire, they'll worship the mountain because they feel something there, and that's a natural feeling, which is our original love for God. Srivas Pandit, give him the mic quick. Too bad that's not on, though. That's the only problem. Go, you got it. We got it.
So one of my colleagues who is an avid traveler, he was planning to go to Australia and he was planning to go and see this mountain. I said, what's so special about this mountain? He said that there's a mountain in the middle of nowhere. It's completely plain land, and then there is this one mountain. I don't know the name of that mountain where... And where it seems the Aborigines, they just worship that mountain. You can't even climb on the top, and it's a very sacred mountain and stuff like that, just to add to what you were trying to say.
If you see tourists go to the Grand Canyon, you get out of the car, nothing can prepare you practically. You look out, people go, oh my God. Or Mount Fuji. In Japan, it's like that too. It's so abrupt. It sticks up, you're never ready for it. Once you see Fuji-san, and it's like, oh my God. And this is natural. It's in the living entity. When they see a manifestation of beauty or grandeur in the material nature, they say, oh my God. Because that's where it comes from. Another one? Yeah, go ahead. From Shamalangi.
Yeah, she says that she really likes, this is from the Adi, CC Adi 1.55 purport. She really likes this quote. His existence can be realized by one who has the single qualification of submissiveness and who thereby becomes a surrendered soul.
We can do that, right? Yes. I mean, speculating to understand the absolute truth and running all kinds of theories and developing particle accelerators that go around the earth and stuff, that's hard work. But developing submissiveness, that's something I could do at home. I mean, that's doable. And that's where God is fully available to the living entity. Nowhere else. As Prabhupada's saying in this particular section, nowhere else is he available except through this submissiveness. Otherwise, what you get is your own speculative process that you can just take with you and worry about for the rest of your life. But if you become actually submissive, then God will reveal the truth path to you. Okay, yes?
So this, I had a similar experience. What you were saying is this submissiveness topic. I was just looking at an internet course. They have free courses now. And so there was this professor in MIT who's giving a course on God, consciousness and mind. So I said, what is this? And I looked into it. I listened to him. And the conclusion he drove at was that if you follow the logic and philosophy and everything, whatever is existing in Western philosophy, then you can say that it is a good idea to believe in God because of various reasons, but you cannot prove that there is a God. You cannot. There was a term he used, and so. But this is the thing, that if you are not submissive, how can you actually see God? So it's an entirely different track along which these Western philosophies.
By the same token, I can't see a cell in a physics class if I'm not submissive. I've seen it in college classes. You walk in and, just try walking in, put your feet up on the desk, and the teacher's talking. It's like, yeah, right, I already know all this stuff. in order to understand the structure of a cell in a biology class, you have to come in and be submissive and listen. Okay, somebody's talking. Somehow they got here. They're at the front of the class. I'm back here. And they must have some authority. So I'm going to listen to them, if not for nothing else, to get my degree. And then so you have to at least be artificially submissive. And then they say, okay, do this, do that. Here's all your homework. Take it home. And that's submission. It's like, okay, I'm submitting. What are you doing in college? I'm submitting to the desires of other superior people. That's what living entities do. Otherwise, you won't get anything. So, who would you rather submit to? Some ordinary person or to Krishna? And if you submit to Krishna, then you get perfect knowledge. And if you submit to somebody who's imperfect, then you get imperfect knowledge. Case closed. All right, so we tried. We fell short once again, but we're going to try again. We'll continue with this perpetual reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the perpetual chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, which is a manifestation of Krishna's flute song, Prabhupada says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Keep that with you when you're chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, that you're actually hearing Krishna's flute in Goloka by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So now we're going to put away all the Shastra deities with great efficiency, but love and care. And then we're going to stand up and we're going to have a worship service for the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Go Premanande Haribo! Thank you very much, everyone who joined us online. The broadcast will continue for a little while into the Kirtan. Hare Krishna. Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.